Lessons learned during the slow time about CJ Stroud, revisiting some comparisons about the Texans quarterback and where he stacks up to two of the more polarizing guys in the game. Plus, should we be a little more concerned about these skill guys? Go inside the locker room.
Yeah. It's the locker room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey. Locker room, yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk, yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize, every angle's what we really do. We the source, we the pulse of the city too. Landlocked, got the game in the headlock. Localize every time, can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, we top two and we not too. Plugged in daily digital on YouTube. We got taste for days, opinions to give, we got takeaways.
2 weeks, baby. 2 weeks till training camp. 15 days to be exact, but who's counting? I am very excited about it. Texans will finally be at camp in the slow part of the year. God, it'll drive you nuts. Will be forgotten. Shout out to Netflix, because Netflix kind of made this slow time a little bit easier. They gave you a nice football fix. One of the best things that they do. Quarterback in season 2 is out. I've very much enjoyed watching this. It features 3 quarterbacks: Jared Goff, Joe Burrow, and Kirk Cousins. And as I always do when I watched it, and I actually put up a little video about this, but I kind of want to expand on it, I localized it. And I tried to connect it to the man who plays the most polarizing position here, CJ Stroud, and where he stacks up specifically to Burrow and Goff, and kind of a lesson that we can take away from the Kirk Cousins thing. Also kind of want to touch on the skill guys. Should we be a little more concerned about these skill guys than we are? I'm pretty optimistic about this. I think they've done a pretty good job of addressing some things, but should there be a little bit more concern about that? Plus, why in the big scheme of things, sometimes it just doesn't matter what your quarterback is, and we can take, or how good he is. I'll explain that a little later on. Shout out to Bobtac for sponsoring the segment and taking care of safety supply around Houston. So I want to start with just a simple question based off of this QB Netflix thing. And if you have anything you want to throw in, get it into the chat. Let me know what you want to talk about. But this is a really simple question. And some people might think it's the craziest thing ever. But here's the question that I have. Is CJ Stroud closer to Joe Burrow or Jared Goff? And some people will scoff at the idea that CJ Stroud could be compared to Jared Goff. But it's actually been happening for quite some time. As a matter of fact, we go back to the draft. This is CJ Stroud's draft profile right here. You can see him right there. He's got the hoodie on. They got the prospect grade, the height, the hands, all that, the breakdown. And you see all this stuff. And then you get the analysis by, wait for it, Lance Zierlein, one of the most respected draft guys, not just in Houston, but in the country. But he has a comparison to, right here, Jared Goff. And Jared Goff is a guy who finished top 5 in MVP voting last year. His name never, ever comes up when you're talking about elite quarterbacks and some of the best players in the game. But at this point, heading into year 10, Jared Goff's had a pretty solid career. Now, I think you would say his surroundings have been pretty favorable. I think Sean McVay maximized what he could get with Jared Goff. Then he traded him for Matthew Stafford. He won the Super Bowl with Stafford after losing the Super Bowl with Goff. And then in Detroit, I know Detroit historically and even recent to when Goff got there, Detroit kind of did a very nice job of rebuilding and putting a good squad around Jared Goff. And you can make a case that, you know, his shortcomings kind of the reason they haven't been able to get over the hump the last couple of years. So it's an interesting thing there. as far as Burrow goes, Joe Burrow is kind of an interesting case study. And I want to talk about the wild ride of year 3 in a sec. But Joe Burrow has been in the league for 5 years. I don't know if it seems longer or if it seems shorter, but Joe Burrow has been in the league for 5 years. And on one hand, he's had 3 elite seasons when it comes to playing the quarterback position. Year 2, ended up in the Super Bowl. Few points away from winning a Super Bowl. Year 3, in the AFC Championship game. Ended up losing. A little bit of controversy against the Chiefs, but ends up doing that. And then the other 2 seasons that he's played, he's had season-ending injuries. So one of the bigger knocks on Joe Burrow is he hasn't been able to stay healthy in 40%, 2 out of 5 of the seasons that he's played. But I don't think there's anyone in the world that would say that Joe Burrow isn't better than Jared Goff. I think we would all agree on that Joe Burrow is better than Jared Goff. So the question is, what is the measurement for CJ Stroud? And Frank Z in the chat says Goff has 5 playoff wins and 5 losses. What does that mean? Is that a compliment? Is that I would have to see like what that is supposed to mean. CJ's 2-2. What do you think? You think is that bad? I mean, it's not great, but is that terrible? 5-5, 500 in the playoffs. Peyton Manning's career record in the playoffs was 14-13. So I don't know. What does 5-5 mean when it comes to Jared Goff? Don't know. I guess is that supposed to be bad? Drew Brees was 9-9. His career playoff record was 9-9. So I don't know. I don't know what that's supposed to mean when it comes to the playoff record. Drew Brees was 500. Peyton Manning was 1 game over 500. So I don't know what that means. Trey of Texas says a 500 playoff winning percentage isn't actually bad. No, I don't think so either at all. I will say there's like specific times where Jared Goff has come up short. But I would say CJ Stroud is somewhere in the middle. I'm copping out. I'm on the fence. I would say CJ Stroud is somewhere in the middle. I think Goff is very dependent on surroundings. I think to a certain point, Burrow is. You look at the defense last year, they kind of held him back. But I think Joe Burrow is able to overcome poor offensive line play and a lot of times Houdini his way into wins. I think there's times where CJ Stroud can do that. I think Jared Goff needs perfect things around him. I do think he's grown as a player, though. Early on, the Rams didn't trust him to change plays at the line of scrimmage. It seems like he's doing a lot more of that in Detroit. So he has progressed. I would say CJ Stroud is somewhere in between those two guys. I would say he's somewhere in between those two. I would say he's slightly above Goff, and I would say he's slightly below Burrow. Texans Forever says Stroud is way better than Goff. I don't know that I can say that right now with this sample size. I mean, Goff was top 5 in MVP voting. Better surroundings though. But that game will drive you crazy if you start dismissing other quarterbacks and then talking about surroundings. But I would say he's somewhere in between. Now, here's the wild thing about these guys. And I'm talking about all 3 of the guys on Netflix. And if you haven't checked it out, QB on Netflix season 2 is out. I know we all miss football. We are about an hour and 20 minutes away from being 2 weeks away from the start of the season. I think year 3 is interesting for a quarterback, especially for CJ Stroud. And in the CJ Stroud, we've covered from top to bottom. We've covered from top to bottom how wild this is for CJ Stroud. Historic rookie season. Then the standards that he's set are high. He does not reach those standards. A lot of it has to do with the surroundings. A lot of it has to do with stuff that maybe he could have controlled. But based on the standards that he set, CJ Stroud had a disappointing year 2. Now we're going to year 3. After year 3, what happens for a quarterback? You're eligible for an extension. We're still very, very early in the game with CJ Stroud. But I think it's fascinating when you look at what happened to these 3 quarterbacks in year 3 during their career. Joe Burrow went to his second consecutive AFC Championship game as quarterback of the effing Bengals. Like, let's think about that. As quarterback of the effing Bengals, he beat the Chiefs and then lost in the Super Bowl to Stafford, who was traded for Goff. So there's kind of a full circle thing. And then in year 3, he loses in the AFC title game. And then he has the wrist injury. And his year 4, you would say you don't feel much worse about him, but you don't feel much better about the team. So I don't want to say he's in no man's land, but if you have another year like you did last year with the Bengals, if the Bengals don't make the playoffs this year, they're looking for a new coach. Period, point blank, end of story. If the Bengals don't make the playoffs this year, they're looking for a new coach. But that's the wild first 3 years of Joe Burrow. Jared Goff's interesting too. Because Jared Goff, we all remember Jared Goff was the number 1 pick. Carson Wentz ended up going after him. And early on, Carson Wentz was the toast of the league. Before Carson Wentz got hurt and Nick Foles came in, they ended up winning the Super Bowl. But had Carson Wentz played that entire season, he damn well could have messed around and won an MVP. But Jared Goff, kind of a little bit of a sluggish start. Then the coach arrives, and I think this is important. The coach arrives, Sean McVay, and Sean McVay completely turns him around. He goes from looking lost to looking like someone that you can win with. And they did win with. And in year 3, Jared Goff went to a Super Bowl. And it had a lot to do with the coach and the system and the scheme. The original scheme did not fit him. And they get a new scheme. They go to the Super Bowl. Definitely could have performed a little bit better, but he goes to a Super Bowl, and then he just kind of tops off. And you kind of get on that mediocre treadmill where your ceiling isn't as high as you would like it to be, and that's when they punted on Goff, and they ended up trading him to the Lions for Stafford. But these 2 guys both played in Super Bowls their first 3 years for different reasons. But the scheme with Goff, I think, is interesting because CJ Stroud this year, year 3, new scheme. Who knows what happens? The Rams had also put together pretty good defense. They'd done a good job of stockpiling assets. They were bad for a long time. But the scheme is what turned around Jared Goff. And why Jared Goff was able to figure some stuff out in year 3. And CJ Stroud's way further along than he was. But Jared Goff, his head coach was Jeff Fisher, and he was kind of in no man's land. We know Jeff Fisher very well around here. And then you bring in Sean McVay and you figure some stuff out. So the scheme kind of helped them out. I think that's wild when it comes to year 3. The Kirk Cousins thing, and I want to touch on Cousins. I'm not going to sit here and say CJ Stroud is Kirk Cousins. I think in the short term and the long term, CJ Stroud's better than Kirk Cousins. I think we can all agree on that. If you disagree, cool. But I think we can all agree. And I have a lot of respect for Kirk Cousins. But Kirk Cousins 3 years in, and he wasn't even the first quarterback taken in the draft that he was selected. RG3 was who Washington selected. But Kirk Cousins started 9 games through 3 seasons with Washington. And then the next 8 years, he started damn near every game. When you divide out between Washington and the Vikings. He was with the Vikings for 5 years. You want to talk about a mediocre treadmill? That is a mediocre-ass treadmill. 5 years, half decade of Kirk Cousins with the Minnesota Vikings. What a forgettable era that was. But I do think there's a Kirk Cousins localized lesson. Because I think much like CJ Stroud last year, after his performance in year one, he kind of increased the expectations. I always talk about what expectations have you set? What standard do you want me to hold you to? And we kind of held him to elite status last year. Maybe CJ Stroud was a little bit too crowned. Maybe he's never going to end up being Joe Burrow. He's never going to end up being Josh Allen. He's never going to end up being Patrick Mahomes. And that's fine because you can win with those guys. But what's happened to Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins goes from a guy who you think can be a good backup to a guy that's made $293 million in his NFL career. One of the best businessmen of our lifetime when it comes to America's game. Shout out to the businessman that is Kirk Cousins. But he also raised his expectations so much to where perhaps maybe they were unfair. And maybe that's what happened with CJ Stroud in year one. Maybe that's not the type of quarterback that we're looking to see. Maybe CJ Stroud is one of those guys who, again, between Goff and Burrow, where he's able to flip the switch, he's able to perform on the big stage, which is something Kirk Cousins can do and still can't. Primetime Kirk Cousins. But maybe there needs to be something in between. Because as good as Joe Burrow was last year, Cincinnati didn't make the playoffs. So it might not matter if he's closer to Joe or Goff, because the Texans are going to have to put you want the organization and the situation around him, you want it to resemble what Goff has had more so than what Joe Burrow's had. I don't know that Zach Taylor's even a good coach at this point. Maybe that's unfair. I don't know that Zach Taylor's a good coach. But you need the Texans to surround Jared Goff like the Rams did year 2 and 3. And that was critical. This is, it's one thing to have CJ Stroud have a really good first year and a miss second year, and now we're heading into year 3. It's not ideal. It's very, very pivotal. But with Jared Goff, he looked completely lost. And the guy that was selected after him was getting all types of hype in Carson Wentz. But the Rams and Lions have put Jared Goff in position to where if he was just a little bit better, if he was a little bit closer to the middle to where he is currently and where Joe Burrow is, he might have a Super Bowl ring. And that's why it's just not all on the quarterback. Like CJ Stroud goes out there and plays like Joe Burrow this season. That's going to be cool for your fantasy team. Might be cool for the offense. Quite frankly, with this defense, it'd be a lot. But if you don't have a good defense and you don't have a good scheme, it's not going to go well. We know the Texans do have a good defense. I think there's some lessons to be gained from this QB series as we localize it during the slow news time. Oh, wait, shout out again to Kirk Cousins for $293 million in career earnings. That is impressive. But we're going to learn about the Texans, and we're going to learn what in the hell the Texans are made of when it comes to an organization. If the Nick Caley hire doesn't work, we're in a tough spot. We're in a tough spot. It's critical. And that's kind of what happens in year 3. Joe Burrow's had the same coach the entire time. It started out well. It started out well for him the first few. Jared Goff didn't. And they had to bring in a new system and figure some stuff out. So being between Jared Goff and being between Joe Burrow, it's perfect. It's ideal, especially if the Texans do their part and they resemble more what the Rams did and what the Lions did more so than what the Bengals have done with Joe Burrow. Where it's a very bad offensive line and it's a suspect defense and he's expected to flip the switch and save all butts, as I always say. So there's 2 questions. where is CJ in comparison to those guys? And where is the organization in comparison to the organizations those guys have played for? I know Goff's played for 4 more years. But you kind of get what I'm saying. So it's really a 2-part question. Unless I feel like there's probably a little bit of fatigue around here of talking about, well, if this quarterback had that and that quarterback had this and this guy has that, and they got to get past that. So I think it's a 2-sided question. Where is CJ and where is the organization? And it's very pivotal. And it goes back to the question that is going to start to kind of shape up in 14 days. And then maybe a year, 2 years after that, what the hell is this Nick Caley guy about? What is he about? Nick. We'll see. But it's critical. I enjoy watching these quarterbacks. And here's the other thing. Once that contract kicks in, it becomes a little bit more difficult to put the team around him. And in fairness, there were some Burrow comps too with CJ, especially after year 1. But there were some of those. Kyle Nance on the super chat. You ain't never hate. Swarm says, just got out a Ballerina movie, dope flick. I don't even know what Ballerina is. You will have to fill me in. I love the movies. Don't know what Ballerina is about. It sounds like it could go a number of ways. Don't know what's up with that. Jake Asman, Mr. JETS, Jets. He says, what is Landry Locker about? That is the question. I'm glad Jake's here because I had another question lined up on the show that I think might kind of be connected to Jake Asman. And I actually think the Jets are going to be a sneaky, scrappy team this year. I think they're going to find a way to surprise some people and win some games. I think I could see the Jets sneaking into the playoffs. But long term, not really the best recipe for success to have Justin Fields as the quarterback. I think we would all agree with that. But my question was this when it came to the quarterback position. And again, this is all motivated by the slow news time, and this is motivated by QB on Netflix. But what teams are in the deepest QB hell right now? In other words, like what team do you look at and say, to quote Varsity Blues, Jonathan Moxon, I don't want your life? Who do you look at and say, damn, that team's in some deep QB hell? Because I'd say the Jets. I don't think it's hellacious to kick the tires on Justin Fields. Now, if you find yourself in the Pittsburgh Steelers situation where you're kicking the tires on a young quarterback or a veteran quarterback and you kind of get in that Indianapolis Colts area, which I think is the number one example of QB hell, then you're talking. But sometimes you just have to make do. Like we talk about quarterbacks a lot, and I don't even know where the Colts would have found a quarterback. There's probably some sort of opportunities we could look at and say, maybe they could have done this, but I mean, sometimes you just can't find it. It's hard to find good quarterbacks. It's very rare. We've seen it a couple of times where few franchise quarterbacks emerge from the same draft. We've seen times where they look good and then they kind of fall off. But I would say that the team in the deepest QB hell right now is without a doubt Indianapolis. Because you have LaFar Jackson, a.k.a. Anthony Richardson, who he's not the guy. And Daniel Jones is going to be the starter. And that's kind of what you're convincing yourself on right now. If you're an Indianapolis Colts fan, you're having to watch football and you're having to have two mindsets. You don't have the mindset of, all right, hopefully Daniel Jones can duplicate what Gardner Minshew did a couple of years, and hopefully we're able to compete for a playoff spot and figure something out. And if he doesn't, then maybe Anthony Richardson comes in. And I'm sure some people will even talk themselves into Anthony Richardson. His durability should have gotten a lot more attention than it did coming into the draft. Some reason it didn't. Everybody was focused on Bryce Young's size. The guy hurt himself dancing and missed a game at Florida. He had a surgery and he had a shoulder problem and he had a concussion. So that should have been a problem. He sucks. He's LaFar Jackson. He's not good. So that's a hellacious spot with Indianapolis. And you just lay out the quarterbacks that they've had since Andrew Luck. I would say that is the deepest amount of hell possible. Cam Ward, we don't know what he's going to be. It's at least exciting for the Tennessee Titans. And quite frankly, if it doesn't work out, they're probably going to be bad enough to where they'll have another chance to get another quarterback. Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence, not great. Let's see what it looks like this year with the new coach, but not as hellacious. So I would say right now, if we're listing a top five in no specific order, I would say that having what Indianapolis has is terrible. Denver, good situation with Bo Nix. Kansas City, obviously. The Chargers with Justin Herbert, you're fine. Geno Smith with the Raiders, I guess if you're going to do a little 2-year type of thing, you could do a lot worse. So that's not too hellacious of a situation. And quite frankly, they need to just make some sort of playoff run. So there's not really much pressure on them. The AFC East is interesting. I think Drake May, good situation. See what it looks like. Josh Allen, been the best quarterback statistically in football the last 2 years, and he's the reigning MVP. We already mentioned Justin Fields. Paying Tua what the Miami Dolphins are paying Tua is kind of hellacious. I think that is a bad situation. I think the Darren Waller signing is actually very appropriate. I think it's very symbolic of where they're at.
High-grade marijuana called Kush on the streets.
And you got Bobby Slowick there, and he's in his job. I saw this. I got a peek of Bobby Slowick's contract. His job is to carry Mike McDaniel's vape. That's number one in his job, and then he needs to watch tape with him and just make sure that his headset doesn't fall on the ground when he's calling plays. That's Bobby Slowick's. But I think quarterback hell. On one hand, you have the Indianapolis Colts in that weak-ass competition. And then I would say paying Tua what you're paying Tua, especially once the salary cap situation continues, I think that's quarterback hell. Dallas, I know a lot of people don't like Dak Prescott. I don't know that they really had a choice. So they had to do it. Giants, not awesome. Philly, you're good. Washington, you feel great. I think everyone in the NFC North feels fine, although we don't know what J.J. McCarthy is going to be with the Vikings. I actually give them credit for punting on Sam Darnold. They could have easily been a team that could have overpaid Sam Darnold, but I actually think they deserve credit for punting on him, although they kind of punted when they drafted McCarthy. Atlanta, we'll see. Carolina, Bryce Young, they're finally able to put assets around him. We'll see what that looks like. New Orleans is a disaster. Now, they might be bad enough this year to where they luck out and get the number one pick, but you're talking about Tyler Shuck and Spencer Rattler, I think, as quarterbacks. That's embarrassing. And before that, Derek Carr hurt his shoulder. Big deal. What were you going to do with that? So put the Saints. We got a table for 5 in QB hell. The Saints have entered the table. They're joining the Dolphins and the Colts. So we have 3 seats. I'm not putting the Steelers with Aaron Rodgers there. I think that's fine if you want to kick the tires. Now, if you want to, hopefully they don't like sell their soul like the Jets did for Aaron Rodgers, but I'm not putting the Steelers in there. It has been a bad situation, but I'm not quite putting the Steelers there. We only got 5 seats. Arizona with Kyler Murray, it could be worse. Matthew Stafford with the Rams. Obviously, the clock is ticking, but it could be worse. San Francisco, Brock Purdy, I guess that's fine. They got a pretty good team-friendly deal. I'm putting Seattle in quarterback hell. You overpaid Sam Darnold. It was one of those situations where they bought low in Minnesota. They got what they got. Eventually, the real Sam Darnold stood up, Slim Shady style. And now Seattle, they let Geno Smith go for Sam Darnold. Is that really that much of an upgrade? The answer is no. Spoiler alert, the answer is no. So I'm putting Seattle in QB hell. So we have 4 people sitting at the table. Seattle, the Saints, although things could go pretty well pretty soon for them. The Dolphins and the Colts. Who is taking the 5th seed at QB hell? Do I need to put the Browns in there? They got a lot of guys. I just feel like this is the type of year where Kevin Stefanski F's around and gets in the playoffs. Who's taking that 5th seat in QB hell? The Raiders. I think the Raiders did all right getting Geno Smith. You got Pete Carroll. You want to win immediately? You could do worse than Geno Smith. Who's getting that 5th seat? Did we give it to the Giants? Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Jackson Dart? I don't know. I kind of like the Giant tire kick. Maybe we'll just leave it for a table of 4. Maybe we'll just leave it. We'll leave it for a table of 4 when it comes to QB hell. I don't think the Jets need to be in there quite yet. Not yet. But it could always be a lot worse. I think paying Kirk Cousins is kind of QB hell. I know I'm disrespecting the guy that I just kind of compliment. I think paying Kirk Cousins would kind of be QB hell. If you're paying Kirk Cousins what Minnesota was paying him and stuff, I think that's a little bit of QB hell. You know what else is hell? If your company needs to be safe and they're buying from the big guys that just rip you off, that doesn't happen at Bobtac. Bobtac.com, 409-744-8225. You can text them right now. Just tell them you heard about them on the stream. Go ahead and say, heard about you on the stream. And hopefully, if you are in the safety business, whether it's spill control, trucking, maritime supply, whether you need some gloves, FR coveralls, protective clothing, anything you need to get the job done, they got you covered. 45 years industry experience from Bobby. He's got his son tagging along with him as well. All things safety, anything trucking. If you work in chemical plants, local trucking, I know we got a lot of truckers that listen. You can get a hold of them 24/7. You don't see something, let them know they can likely get it. They got great prices, unmatched service. None of that AI crap. They specialize in local customer service. We need to start supporting our local businesses because these big businesses don't give a rat's ass about us and they don't mind jacking up the prices. And just because you have familiarity with them, you just accept it. You don't need to do that when it comes to this type of stuff, especially with safety. Bobtac, locally owned and operated, right here in Houston. They got you covered. Trucking, maritime, hazmat, anything. If you need to get the crew hydrated, they got you covered. Forget all that other crap. Pay less, get more. Shout out to Bobtac, 409-744-8225. Not a hellacious situation when you're talking about Bobtac. The QB series, I actually liked the wide receiver one better than the QB one. Although I am enjoying this one. I'm a couple episodes in. And I also know that Kirk Cousins is going to get benched. That's the best thing about watching it. Or it could be the worst thing if you're a football fan. Would you rather watch this knowing what's going to happen? Or would you rather not know? Because you watch football, you pretty much know how every game ended. At least the nerdy-ass people that are here in this community, in the SNL community, you kind of know what the hell happened. So I kind of think it's cool knowing, oh, well, Jared Goff's going to F it off in the playoffs. Joe Burrow is just going to keep losing games because of the defense. His house is also going to get robbed. And Kirk Cousins is going to get benched. And he's going to kind of make a stink out of it, I envision. I enjoy knowing about it in this situation. Although I do enjoy when you're watching like a documentary every once in a while and you don't know much about the sport. Usually it's like a niche or something like that, like some sort of Olympic doc. I do enjoy that. Like, I remember the Carl Lewis doping. I enjoyed it because I really didn't remember what he did. Michael Johnson was kind of the start of my track viewing. Shout out to Michael Johnson, Waco, and gold cleats. I remember when Donovan Bailey beat him in a race, and Donovan Bailey called him a coward because he came up lame. But I like knowing what's going on with this QB series. Very much enjoy it. The receiver, though, I think is awesome. I don't know that any Texans could really be entertaining. I don't think Nico Collins would be entertaining at all on this. And then they don't really have big enough stars. CJ on this, I don't think D'Amico would love that. Kind of could see CJ wanting to do it, though. Couldn't you? There's kind of a balance. There's a balance between wanting the spotlight and doing. I mean, Jared Goff isn't really a big spotlight guy. Cousins isn't really either. Burrow kind of is. But Nico would be pretty boring. Pretty cut and dry. Brandon Cassidy, off topic, which is fine this time of the year. What's the best barbecue in Houston? See, I don't think Houston's like the greatest barbecue spot. I think Truth is elite. Not going to question Truth. Also, you can drink a couple beers in the line. For me, for like efficiency, options, and really price too, I think Pit Room Memorial is the best. It's big. If you feel like a sandwich, you can get a sandwich. If you feel like a soup, you can get a soup. They got barbecue tacos. They got all the meats that you're used to. And it's really spread out. They got the ice cream at the back. They got the bar. This isn't even a live read or anything. I think I went there the other day with Stutz and Kunkel. I think for me, it's Truth. Or not Truth, it's Pit Room and Memorial. Which gives a lot of space, and their brisket slaps. It is a elite spot. The original, some people prefer. I prefer this one because it's spread out. Line moves very fast. Sometimes if you go to a barbecue spot, you don't want the barbecue. They got all kinds of sandwich. I know Stutz likes the Reuben that they make ever so often, but it's hard to top them with all their variety and all their options. So that would be mine. Is the Pit Room in Memorial. Don't have to mess with as much if you go to Truth. Can't go wrong at Truth. Truth is great. But that would be me. Pinkerton's also gets a lot of love. You can't go wrong with that. They do their thing. But yeah, and AA knows those tacos at Pit Room are elite. And they got the 2 big ass tacos and 2 sides. I think it's like $21, $22. Some will say, oh, that's expensive. Not really. I mean, barbecue sides, they will tax you. I think a 2 meat plate's $20 and it's solid. But yeah, Pit Room, you got to check that out. Raul says he's waiting for the Lassiter jersey to be in stock. Is it not? They don't have Lassiter jerseys yet. It's a good jersey to get. They had some weird ass rules about jerseys, and this was when they pushed that uniform crap for so long, but there was supposedly like a deadline where they had to give the information on the new uniforms, and they were talking about there's like some sort of rules. I don't get it. I don't have an idea. Cameron says, imagine them doing a DB series and Sting was one of them. God, he would hate it. And he would be very boring. If they did Derek Stingley full access for 24 hours, my God, he would probably get the reputation. A lot of people don't know. Man, a few words. Man, if they put Derek Stingley on there, it would be very, 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 very boring. Joe Mixon would be good on running back. Yes, he would. Yes, he would. Just about that business, very confident, chip on his shoulder, balls out. I'm sure his mic'd ups are solid. Yeah, Joe Mixon would be good on running back. That's for sure. A candidate. He would maybe be the most entertaining on offense. Mixon. I'm trying to think if anyone's even in the discussion. Not really. Pretty straight to the point with the other guys. I think it's a little bit of coincidence, but yeah, pretty cut and dry with Nico. And then all the other receivers either not really at that level or not. So yeah, I think Joe Mixon, the running back one, I think you're onto something there. Speaking of the offensive skill guys, should we be a little bit more concerned about these guys? We just talked about CJ Stroud. We talked about how pivotal year 3 is. And we talk about surroundings. Last year, we were perhaps a little too high on the receivers. And I know we can use injuries as an excuse, but you also have eyes and you also had a decent sample size that it wasn't clicking. Maybe it wasn't all their fault. Maybe Tank Dell wasn't quite back from the injury, but it wasn't clicking. And we all saw it. It was blatantly obvious. We saw what was going on with the injuries and everything going on with the Texans at the time. But now you have a guy who's missed a large chunk of games in Christian Kirk. A receiver you feel good about, but he misses games too in Nico Collins, and you have 2 rookies. And then you have Justin Watson and whatever the hell else they do on the back end. There's reason for optimism, and I like what these rookies can do. And I'm actually kind of high on Christian Kirk just because of how I think that they're going to use guys in the slot and what we saw from Kirk in a short time. But should you really feel great about that? Then you look at the tight end position. I've started my preparation for fantasy football draft. It's going to be 2 days after I get back from West Virginia with the Texans in West Virginia. Myself, Cody Stutes, SNL will be there. So there will be night streams live from West Virginia. There'll be videos throughout the day, and SNL will be live at 4 per the use. So that's going to be an awesome time, and it's going to take us up to the season. It's not too far away. It's about a little bit less than a month, and we'll have a couple weeks of training camp in between that. So right along with us there. But I'm looking at all of the rankings when it comes to tight ends. And look, I'm not a dumbass. I've kind of had some tough times in these fantasy streets lately. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be balling out or anything like that. But I wasn't going to put Dalton Schultz on my fantasy team, but I did want to see, since we do cover the Texans, I did want to see, hey, where does Dalton Schultz rank when it comes to tight ends? Wasn't even in the top 25. Imagine that. Like, think about that. The Texans are paying Dalton Schultz $11 million. And I think for the most part, sometimes fantasy can be misleading. It's not like he's blocking. But they're paying $11 million to a guy who's not even in the top 25. Now, maybe he surprises some folks. But that's asinine. And Nick Caley says he likes tight ends. Tight ends can be a good counter to a bad offensive line. You're not in the top 25. Then you have Joe Mixon. We all love Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon just turned 28 years old. He was banged up this offseason. We don't know what he's going to look like. And we don't know how they're going to use him and what the depth's going to be like. Should we be a little bit, we focus a lot on this offensive line. Should we be a little bit concerned about the skill guys? I'm not. But I also wasn't last year when it came to the receivers. And we got a decent sample size of it. I did think the offensive line sucked. That was one of the things that I was right about. I always thought it sucked. I'm hoping Nick Caley knows what he's doing. There's also the possibility that he knows what he's doing, but there's also the natural growing pains that come with doing something for the first time, which I'm fine with. I don't believe in that we need someone who's called plays before, because guys who've called plays before probably sucked at doing it at some point. And every single offensive coordinator, I've said this 100 times, every single offensive coordinator in the history of the NFL at one point hadn't called plays before he did. So I think that's an ass backwards way of looking at things. Skill position guys, though, you're kind of trying to, it's kind of a little bit of cabin fever. We talk about it before the draft. Usually that second, third week of April. Maybe this is a little bit of cabin fever and you're trying to forecast stuff. I don't give a rat's ass about predictions. I don't care. Like if I'm wrong. I think this is going to be a good offense. I think it's going to be better. I think the defense is going to lower the expectation of the offense. I think it's kind of going to be the identity of this squad. Hashtag D'Amico no O. But the skill guys, let's keep a close eye on that. Let's keep a close eye on that. Luke in the chat says the offensive line can't be worse. Are we sure? I would tend to agree with you, although I've heard that said a number of times covering this football team, and I've seen it be worse. I feel like that's a dangerous place to get. I think it's dangerous to assume two things when it comes to year-to-year production for players in the NFL. I think it's very dangerous to assume that it can't get worse, and I think it's dangerous to assume that the best is ahead. It's kind of dangerous. But that's the beauty of the game. That's why it's America's game. Because of the unpredictability. The defense, I don't think there's anything to be concerned about with the defense. What could even really go wrong? Because you have the perfect counters. It's when D'Amico Ryan says iron sharpening iron, I think his defense is what he has in mind. Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter pressure up front. It makes the DB's job easier, and Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter back there doing their thing. It makes the D-line's job easier. And then the guys in the middle running around. But as a result of that, they're put in the right spot by D'Amico Ryans, and they got badasses behind him, and they got badasses in front of them. So that's what iron sharpening iron looks like. I don't think there's a threat yet to being a one-dimensional football team, but I do think the real question, and the question that we've hammered home, I'm probably going to hammer home for the next 2 weeks. But the question is, what the hell is a Nick Caley offense? Nick. And how good can the defense be? Not will the defense be good? How good can the defense be? Because you can. I'm not going to sit here and say defense wins championships. And that's always kind of the argument, defense wins championships, blah, blah, blah. A lot of times people watch the Super Bowl and they point to an example of one dominant performance and say, see, that's what happens. But the Eagles had a really good offense last year. I mean, Saquon Barkley was breaking records. They were unstoppable on fourth down. They got one of the best wide receiver duos in the league. They got one of the best tight ends in the league. They got one of the best offensive lines in the league. The defense did rough up Kansas City. But how good can this defense be is really the question. And I think the answer is really effing good. I think the answer is really effing good. But they do need to equal out that seesaw. They do need to equal out that seesaw. Like when D'Amico Ryans goes up there after a game in which the defense balls out and the offense gets lost, says our defense needs to be better, I think it's a bad look for him. Because you're watching the offense struggle. You're watching the offense be poorly coached. And the guy who does a really good job on the defensive side of the rock, as good as anyone, he's going up there and he's speaking like a defensive coordinator instead of a guy who's supposed to balance stuff out. So how good can this defense be? I think it can be good. I think it can be really good. The offense, your guess is as good as mine. I guess the unknown is what a lot of people are hanging their hat on. And quite frankly, everyone's optimistic. Or most people are optimistic this time of the year. It's not like the Texans have given you like some sort of reason to be overly cynical, unless you're giving them a lifetime achievement award. It's been a mediocre ass franchise. We all know that. But there's reason for extreme optimism on defense, and there's reason for optimism based on the unknown on offense. Offense. We'll see what it looks like. I think it's going to be exciting. I think it's going to be very exciting. How dependent are they on certain guys? You kind of want to get out of that business too. Dependency. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing in life. It's damn sure not a good thing in football. Sometimes you're able to depend on like a certain player. He's able to take you to the promised land. But when you're overly dependent on quarterback, which we've seen many times here, the running back, wide receiver one, we saw it at different times last year. You kind of find yourself in no man's land. It all goes back to that one guy. Nick. What does he got? What does he got? Is the organization closer to what Goff has been surrounded with or what Burrow has been surrounded with? And where is CJ Stroud? He needs to be right there in the middle because he can't do it himself. They've kind of shown that. He's also got to be a little bit more Burrow in that he can't, if things aren't going his way, and I think this goes back to his quote about controlling what he can control. You can't walk around as the leader of the team looking like your dog just died. Got to figure that out, man. You got to figure that out. You're going to be put in situations where you're going to have to figure that out. Joe Burrow's done it. Jared Goff is not. That's why you got to creep towards that middle. So we'll get a close look at this. And someone in the chat is saying injuries. That's every team. It's every team. That's every team. We'll talk to every NFL fan base in week 8, week 9. There's someone that if that guy hadn't been hurt, we would have won. It's every year. It's every single year. But we'll learn about Nick Caley. We already know about D'Amico. And this is going to be a big year for CJ Stroud. Year 3, it can go a number of ways. 2-2 right now in the playoffs. Shout out to Frank for saying that Goff was 5-5. He said he was on that high grade though, which is understandable and good. And you are not alone.
High grade marijuana called Kush on the streets.
As far as the offensive line, who's going to be the starting offensive line? Raul's throwing his out. I mean, we've seen a number of combinations. If I had to guess the combo that's going to start at camp, it's going to be Robinson, left to right. It's going to be Robinson, Tomlinson, Andrews, Howard, Fisher. And then there's going to be some crazy competition. There's going to be some guys that are probably put on skates. There's going to be some ugly ass days from this offensive line. And that's good. That's good. We saw it last year. Mario Edwards looked like Warren Sapp in practice. But hopefully it's a little bit better. But there are going to be some guys that are going to get roughed up. I'm interested to see what it looks like when Andrews has to actually block somebody. Because I know he seems to be the guy that the coaches like. He seems to be the guy that I guess he has the edge at the center position. Although I think they like Jared Patterson too. But what does that look like when he actually has to block someone? I'm intrigued. Titus Howard says he's doing everything right. That's great, man. See what that looks like. And then Tomlinson. O-line's going to be crazy. A lot of competition. Let's keep an eye on those skill guys, though. But I think we have a pretty good idea of what skill guys are going to make the team and who's going to start and whatnot. My hottest take is I think that there's a chance Jalen Noel ends up being the best player from this draft. I think there's a strong chance. He's strong. He's fast. He's a slot guy. He seems to have a nice makeup. He actually benched more than Amon-Ra St. Brown at the combine. Amon-Ra St. Brown's a weightlifting dude. And they said he had a hurt shoulder. I don't know if that's like Uncle Rico revisionist history, but he said he had a hurt shoulder. Ran a fast-ass 40 for a slot guy. I think there's a chance Jalen Noel. Higgins is nice too, though. How do they use him? I think it's more of a Drake London thing than a Nico Collins thing. How do they get the job done in the red zone? Someone says Titus Howard was playing Fortnite on Twitch earlier. Good for him, man. Play them video games. That's what's up. I know he was giving away tickets a few years ago. There, good for Titus Howard playing Fortnite. Do people still play Fortnite? I never played it, so is that still a thing? I thought it finally got replaced. Is that? I know we got some gamers in the chat. Is Fortnite still popular? Perhaps not. Hey, different strokes are different, folks. I know they've been pushing back that GTA like almost like Dr. Dre's next album, which got pulled out. Okay, Fortnite is well and alive still. Okay, so it's still a thing. So good for Titus playing the video games. It's good. It's a good thing to relax, rest. Seems like he's handling. Okay, Fortnite ain't going anywhere. Okay, told you I didn't play. Not smart. Not smart when it comes to the Fortnite. Is Titus good? Can you tell? Oh, no, I know he's on the games. Seems to be in shape too. This is the test, though. Is he gonna look as in shape when he's at camp? A little bit of downtime. Rob says that this is a lot of no's. Let's see. He says, no, Landry. London to Higgins comparison is not okay at all. They're both tall, but London is soft and Higgins plays tough and is country tough. Think Moss and Andre. That's ridiculous. If you're comparing him to Randy Moss, they're nothing alike, brother. Andre, no. I don't think Drake London's soft either. Higgins has the basketball background. I know they move him around a little bit, but I think London, I think that's insane. That's too much, man. He's on that
high-grade marijuana called Kush on the streets.
He might actually be on crack. No offense, Rob. I appreciate you. You might be on something. Think Moss and Andre? Come on, brother. That's crazy. He didn't even really play like Moss. And if he were Andre, he damn sure wouldn't have fallen to the second round, especially with this wide receiver group. I like Higgins, though. A little bit raw. Kind of got negatively impacted by COVID because he didn't start focusing on football till a little bit later on in high school. Then they had COVID and places were getting kicked off. I don't even know if he's really country. A little bit. I mean, I don't think he's that country. But I think Noel's nice. But yeah, I think if you get Drake London out of Higgins, then you should probably be very, very pleased. You should be very pleased about that. if you think Drake London is soft, you wouldn't take Drake London on the Texans right now. He's probably gonna be a top 10 fantasy player this year. That's crazy. Brandon wants to cut Titus for playing Fortnite. I think Brandon wants to cut Titus for breathing, if we're being honest. Appreciate y'all for rolling through. We've rolled through the small time. There's no gaps. There's no gaps. We're 4 years. We're approaching 1 million hours spent listening, and it don't slow down. Business about to pick up, but it never stops, regardless. And when it comes to this Texans stuff, we're all in it together. Shout out to Bobtac for the sponsorships. Reminder to like the damn video. Let me know where I messed up in my analysis. And I appreciate everyone for rolling through, even if you were disgusted by Drake London. Appreciate y'all.
If we got takeaways, if it's up, then it's still
High
number
grade
one.
marijuana
You don't need to
push
try your
on the
luck.
street.
Locker room, yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk, yeah, you know what we about.